crisis has had so little coverage in our popular press. Ian Ball, the chief executive of IFAC, I'm sure many of you from the professional accounting bodies know Ian, made this point in a letter that I'm copying here from the Financial Times earlier this year, and has restated this point in a submission to the G20 in Mexico earlier this week. He makes the point that it's no use calling for governments to hold more capital or to reduce their debts, because frankly they don't know what their asset and liability position is, and they don't really have detailed balance sheets. We know from our work all around the world that it's worse than that, and in many developed countries there is poor quality financial management information, and it doesn't enable citizens and civil society to hold governments to account. Moreover, if it were perfect in most countries, there is a complete lack of PFM capacity in governments. Frankly, in some organisations, some ministries of finance, some supreme audit institutions, there's sometimes just a handful of qualified accountants. And even if they were qualified accountants, many of them will have been trained in the private sector disciplines and find the peculiarities of government accounting quite baffling when they've been taught about the language of profit and loss. Colleagues, we really should have seen that this was coming. I'm reporting here a document from the BBC, and it tells us about Greece. And Greece effectively applied to join the euro based on some false data. This really is not acceptable. We know from the EU investigation in the late 1990s that Greece was effectively guilty of publishing false information as part of its application process. Its deficit then was actually twice the level deemed acceptable for euro entry. Equally, we know that their tax collection was nowhere near the level at which their tax rates would have suggested was collectible. No wonder debt has climbed so enormously in Greece. Of course, that has also been made worse by the very issue that our first speaker spoke about, which is the governance, weak governance in public sector bodies around the world. And last week there was a very major report about government-backed Spanish regional banks and the very weak governance that they were put under, frankly with no accountants as independent members on their board. Why are we surprised that they were exposed to the over-leveraged housing market in Spain and the fact that they now need to be rescued themselves? As I say here, we should have seen all of this coming. And I think this is quite an interesting statistic. It's not one I've seen before. It's on your right-hand side. That on the New York Stock Exchange, government sovereign debt, in terms of the quantity of trades on New York, is actually 5 times the amount of equity trades. Despite what you would think, that enormous market, there is very little information about government sovereign debt and government financial position. And effectively it took a US hedge fund manager to unearth some of this data. And the book I'm referring to on the left-hand side is actually a very interesting read about the global financial meltdown. It took this hedge fund manager to unearth the fact that 4 years ago, the world thought that Greece's sovereign debt was as valuable as US and UK and German sovereign debt. Now, frankly, colleagues, that was a nonsense then and clearly is a nonsense now. And it's unacceptable to all of us that a hedge fund manager can make enormous money out of unearthing that sort of data. We should have been able to make that available. And even in the most mature economies in the world, public financial management can be improved. And I'm giving 3 examples here from 3 major countries. On the right-hand side, in the US, there are really major fears now about US municipalities, many of which are facing very, very significant debt challenges themselves, a number of which are going into bankruptcy protection. The Economist story here is referencing the German Federal Treasury, which found an error in their accounts of some 55 billion. Now, it happened to be good news rather than bad news, but it's not good that they found such an error. And of course, in my own country, in the UK, our National Audit Office is pretty consistently finding very major issues for them to complain about how we use public finances. And in the absence of good quality information, Other analysts produce their own data, and here is some data that I find absolutely fascinating. We had a conference in the UK, an international conference, and we had David Walker, the Auditor General of the United States, the former Auditor General. And he has produced some data in accordance with the Stanford University looking at fiscal responsibility. And he analysed where the United States stacked up against 34 other countries. And as you can see here, 28th out of 34, in some pretty poor company, with Italy and Spain actually higher rated than the US. That gives us all, I believe, something for us to worry about. So what has this got to do with us? Well, actually, poor financial management creates enormous problems. It has enormous implications for equity within a country, for the quality of public service, and of course, in terms of trust and confidence in governments. Public trust is very difficult to achieve and it's very easy to lose. And of course, investor trust is even more challenging, and it's quite clear that we're losing investor trust around the world in the mature economies. Equally, we're finding this is a major issue for the developing world with donors and in terms of donor trust and whether they will invest in developing country economies. So my organisation, SIFA, is saying, is there a solution that we can effect in the global public interest, not the UK public interest, the global public interest? We're calling for a step change in the quality of public financial management. We're talking about the potential for much greater collaboration within the profession and other key stakeholders. And for us, the key issue is, can we grow professional capacity to sustain public financial management for the long term? We're not starting from scratch. There are already some important building blocks in place, and in this slide I'm particularly referencing international public sector accounting standards. The International Federation of Accounting Bodies, IFAC, has created a framework for global standard setting that the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board has embraced and is now, frankly, widely respected. It has a full suite of standards, all developed under a shared conceptual framework. And on the audit side, InterSci, the groupings of all the Auditor Generals around the world, has put in place similar public sector audit standards that enables the auditors to work together. And to back all of that up, the major donors have created a multi-donor trust fund working with both IFAC and InterSci in recognition of this need to strengthen capacity building around the world. Both of these organisations and both of these multi-donor trusts are meeting in our head offices in October, and we're hoping to see very significant developments as a result of all of that. Colleagues, I'm going to skip the next two slides about international public sector accounting standards. But I think what we're seeing around the world is when international standards are applied, they are revealing new information. And this is the very first set of whole-of-government accounts published by the UK just some 2 months ago as part of our budget. It's for the year 2010, but it shows us some really interesting information, new information that we weren't aware of in the UK, that as a country we are facing potential future pension liabilities of £1 trillion. And it also shows us that our public-private partnership arrangements also showing long-term liabilities of in excess of £5 billion, when actually, £40 billion, when only £5 billion was on our traditional, if you like, balance sheets. So international standards are starting to reveal some new financial information. So not surprisingly, IPSASB is consulting on fiscal sustainability reporting by governments, not just at a whole of government level, but also individual government level. And he's expecting in the future to see organisations outline their obligations to be settled in the future, all of their future liabilities, such as pensions, etc., etc. Colleagues, what should we do about all of the issues that I've been talking about? Well, for us, we're saying we think we need to create a global public finance profession. And I'm trying here to illustrate the 6 characteristics of what I think that profession would look like. It includes, right at the top, global public financial management qualifications, broadly set out in line with an international framework. For the developing world at the bottom, this multi-donor trust fund would presumably help us fund individuals taking that global PFM qualification. And of course it means creating a global PFM community, all backed by thought leadership and good policy and technical support. And on the left-hand side, the global approach to capacity building all around the world that could be standardized if we have a global profession. And I'm calling for that profession because professionals, and I'm sure I don't need to say this to this audience, have particular characteristics. They are bound to work in the public interest, not in some politician's interest, but in the public interest. And that, for me, is crucial. And of course, you know as accountants that we're very rigorous about examinations, about training, about ongoing CPD, keeping skills up to date, and how rigorously we enforce regulations and ethics, etc., etc. So for us, it's about creating sustainable organisations that leave a long-term legacy, a genuine capacity development in countries. And if we get that right, what are the outputs from public financial management professionals? Well, these are the things that they do. I don't, in many ways, need to tell you, but as our first speaker spoke about, the importance, the fundamental importance of the budget is so different in the public sector. If you've got quality professionals, you've got a chance of making really important decisions through that budget and providing quality advice to politicians and decision makers, giving assurance through the audit function, being able to certify the accuracy and the integrity of accounts and being able to monitor compliance. In short, colleagues, we're talking about quality accounts with unqualified audit opinions. Frankly, around the world, many public sector bodies are not able to achieve that output. And if we get those outputs right, these are the outcomes we can look forward to. Much better quality decision making by politicians, much more effective targeting of resources to the most important parts of society, more efficient uses of resources, the stronger accountability that we heard about earlier, much greater transparency, and we'll hear more about that later in this conference. In short, colleagues, much greater donor and lender confidence in country systems going forward. So my organisation is calling for a big change in public financial management, and we issued this document late last year at an IFAC conference. We're calling it Fixing the Foundations. We think it's important that we come together as accountants around the world to achieve this step change in public financial management. And we're seeking partners because we're such a small body in the UK. We can't do this on a global basis. We want to work with international agencies, donors, etc., national governments, but also professional accounting bodies, many of them represented in this room, the SAFA members. Can we work together to strengthen the public financial management profession in this region? And we know these sort of partnerships can work. I just wanted to illustrate one example. We're working very closely with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. We were called in by the Accountant General of Nigeria, working with the Auditor General of Nigeria. They want us to train 2,000 additional staff in the next 5 years in their departments. They want us to re-energise their Central Federal Treasury Academy, and all of that is being backed and supported by the World Bank. And what we're putting in place is what we call our International Certificate and Diploma in Public Financial Management, and we're jointly badging it a SIPFA-ICANN qualification, and we're putting in place a fast-track entry process for very senior public civil servants to become members of ICANN. Colleagues, for me, together we can create a sustainable long-term global public finance profession. We had at our conference Professor Matt Andrews from Harvard. He was very critical of existing public financial management investment put in place by donors, because so much of it is focused on short-term training and IT systems. His view is that we need to tackle norms and behaviour if we're really to make a step change in public financial management. Colleagues, what I think we're talking about here is a chance to make that step change, to make a change to the norms and behaviour of how governments work. What a difference 50,000 PFM students would make by 2020 in governments around the world. We look forward to working with SAFA members, trying to put this in place, and I look forward to a good conversation with you. Feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thanks to Edward. We are now coming to the answering session. Before going to the answering sessions, may I request Mr. Niranjan Khatri to say a few words. He is allowed to speak 2 minutes only.
In the morning, I briefly mentioned about next best practices. So before I give my suggestion to this august body, I just want to make a comment. When the timber is knocked off from the forest, the proceeds of the forest go into the GDP. But the fact that that area, which has no forest for next 25 years, does not find any space in our economic system. Nearly 22 years back, I was in a hotel where that hotel was built with beautiful wood. And we realized, oh my goodness, we must have knocked off 400 trees to make this hotel. So we started the concept of compensatory deforestry afforestation. And now that concept has taken roots in many parts of the world, and there's a program called RED. The acronym of RED is Reduction of Emission Through Deforestation and Destruction of Forests. And a large amount of money has been given to Brazil by US to protect its forest. 4 years back, I was in the National Water Committee of India, and I suggested that if you want to bring about greater emphasis on water, then we need to set up a Bureau of Water Efficiency. Incidentally, for those of you who don't know, India already has a Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and thanks to the rating system, they have reduced the energy consumption by about 8,000 megawatts in the last few years. There's another interesting thing which has happened, that Deutsche Bank has conducted a study in 2 states in India, and they found that they are negative GDP, keeping the natural resource in account. So with this backdrop, I would like to suggest to this august body, because I had no intent of sitting over here, but the quality of presentation done by my friend from Pakistan and Mr. Raman and all, it really amazed me that the Financial Committee has finally woken up. So my submission and suggestion to you is that can we have 2 more columns in the balance sheet whereby we get to know the drawdown effect of our business, not current year, but with retrospective effect, number 1. Number 2, if I am I'm just an ordinary manager or something of that sort who doesn't know anything about sustainability, if I'm empowered with tools through the right click of a mouse, and when I'm ordering, say, 10,000 notepads for a large conference, it should tell me that, hey man, you're cutting 200 trees or 300 trees. When that kind of empowerment and knowledge is there, maybe that person will think of some other way, or he'll reduce his or her order. I give an example which is right here in this particular room. Many of you must have used the restroom. The wash basin is made out of glass. Now, if this kind of IT tool was there, right click, while placing order for that glass wash basin, he would have been told the embodied energy of glass is very high. Please go and purchase ceramic. So these are the kind of tools that we need to develop for the future. I know it's difficult. There might be many kind of reservations, but unless we plant new ideas in many people's mind, these ideas will not take root. Thank you very much.
We have already received 3 questions, 2 for Mr. Sabapati. I request him to come here and to answer the question, and 1 for Dr. Ashish. After completing the Sabapati, then Dr. Ashish will start. Thank you.
I think I have been asked to answer 2 controversial questions. One is, how do you see the transparency of the government and central bank role towards sustainability of the needs of the people, since you are representing the Ministry of Finance? How do you see sustainability in relation to corruption and in public sector? I think in my presentation, I have identified concerns of public accountability. I have identified all the problems we encountered. And you all understand that we are after a conflict of over 30 years. And the government is now in the process of identifying those constraints and improving the governance and accountability structure. That also I have highlighted, and I gave importance to those two areas. And as far as these statements are concerned, these questions are concerned, I would consider it as a loose statement. You know, if you say bribery or corruption, then you have to substantiate. Now we have the control mechanisms are in place, the Auditor General is in place, the Parliamentary Committee on Public Enterprises with opposition and the government, 31 members in these two committees. Where are they? What are they doing? And what is the media doing? And I mentioned to you, these are all constitutional provisions, the statutory provisions in terms of which the reporting is taking place. Now I spoke about the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act, number 3 of 2003, which mandate the government to be transparent and commitment, and various reports are submitted, and they are tabled, they are in the website, they are, what is the media doing, what the social civil society organizations doing. Now since they are all mandated in terms of the act, they can go to courts. Why are they not doing it? And also, in a democratic setup, the people are the judges in looking at these things, and they have to pass the judgment. So I don't think these statements are very valid to answer. I think I have identified in my paper and even the central bank reporting. That is all done within the regulatory framework. Do you think that the public servants can violate the provisions of the law, violate the provisions of the rules and regulations? They are answerable. They can be questioned. They can even be questioned in the court of law. So I thought I have answered your question, to both questions. Thank you.
Friends, let us take family as the smallest social unit. Let us start from there. The question is, what kind of lock we should buy? What kind of doors we should construct? How much we should spend on that? The reason is, there is a right to private property, and we want to protect our private property. And therefore, among all expenses, a part we spend on security, whatever may be the form. Similarly, so long there is a border, and every country is considered to be a sovereign, there is a need for security. And therefore, wherever you spend money, you have to allocate some budget for that security measures. And how much depends on what is the current political and international environment. Sometimes you do it to signal to your neighbor. Sometimes you spend it to signal to your citizens that you are secured. And therefore, I don't see any contradiction in that, so long we feel proud about our country and we feel that the boundaries need to be protected. Thank you, friends.
Now I invite Mr. Abbas Uddin Khan, FCA past president and council member of the ICAB, to hand over the token of appreciation for our session speakers. Professor Mamtaz Uddin Ahmad. Mr. V. Kanagasabapati. Dr. Ashish K. Bhattacharya. Mr. Alan Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Khan.